Welcome back, Pack, and welcome back for another fantasy football mock draft video. This time going to be pick number 4. Same rules apply. 10-team PPR. Going to just be up on the Sleeper app today, trying to see what our team's going to look like. And I'm sure we'll get one of these top 4 running backs. And then after this kind of the 4th spot video, I'm really intrigued to see the later picks, as we saw yesterday in the draft with Trevor. He ended up taking one of the receivers there at pick 8. But I'm totally okay with Austin Eckler here in a PPR league. He is going to be dominating behind in the backfield for the Chargers. But like I said, once it gets to that 5th pick, I think that's where you have that consideration of taking a receiver instead as your first round draft pick. Because Dalvin Cook's great, but those are the 5 running backs I would say are the top 5 picks as far as running back goes. And you can kind of switch, mix and match in between those 5. But then you have your consideration for Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp, ideally, as your number 1 spot. So that's something interesting. And something interesting as well that fell to us is Travis Kelce in the 2nd round. Now, there's so many running backs that I love here. Alvin Kamara, one of the 2. But I don't really think Travis Kelce will drop to us in a normal setting. Like, I feel like that's just something unrealistic at the 1-4 for Travis Kelce to go all the way back to us. So I'm not going to take him for the sake of having a smart draft here. Instead, I'm going to go with Kamara. Kamara and Eckler, 2 insane pass-catching running backs. Kelce, of course, does go right after us. But Aaron Jones, Deebo Samuel, Saquon. This is kind of what my draft would look like at the number 1 spot. First quarterback off the board is Josh Allen, Javonte Williams, and then back to us. And we talked about it in the last video with Trevor, trademark cast over there. I love Mark Andrews, and he is great value in the middle of this 3rd round here. As far as receivers go, there are some that I still like that can come back to us as a wide receiver 1. DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, maybe Terry McLaurin. But there's a lot of wide receivers in the room. So I'm going to go with Mark Andrews here. Try something different. Go for an early tight end and 2 running backs instead of a wide receiver and 2 running backs to start. So decent start already. We have insane PPR options, which is exactly how you want to start at pick number 4. AJ Brown, Fournette, Zeke, Mike Evans, James Conner, T. Higgins, Keenan Allen to start the 4th. Kyle Pitts, Justin Herbert to 2nd quarterback off the board. Terry McLaurin, Cam Akers, and David Montgomery. So back to us on the pick. Patrick Mahomes staring at us right in the face. If I got Kelce, that's a stack I could consider in the 4th round. And a stack you should consider if that kind of falls to you. If you can get Kelce in the 2nd round, if you can get Mahomes maybe in the 5th, I think it would be an ideal spot. I just don't like QBs this early. You're going to get enough value later in the draft anyways with all the QBs I talked about in previous videos. Kyler, Jalen Hurts, Russ, and even going into the 90, 100 ADP range in the 9th, 10th round, like Aaron Rodgers, Trey Lance, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins. All of these are decent enough quarterbacks to get you by week after week. And I am just going to go for Michael Pittman. We don't have a receiver. He's easily going to be our receiver 1. And we don't need a tight end, even though Darren Waller and George Kittle are still up. And then goes the dead zone running back room, which is Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, going into this 5th round here. You know we got to do it. We talked about this stack attack in the last video. I got to try the Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews stack for pick number 4 here. I think this is something realistic that you could see in your draft. There's a lot of receiver options that I still loved going into this next round here, and we are still looking for our 2nd receiver. But DJ Moore, one of them, Mike Williams and Courtland Sutton, 3 of the probably 4 or 5 that I would have preferred going into this 6th round. Maybe we could have waited on Lamar, but we already saw, obviously, Kyler went a little bit later, so that probably would have been Lamar instead. But I just really like that stack. You know these 2 are going to go off on a weekly basis together, and you can't really go wrong. We have Kamara and Eckler as our 2 main running backs. I'm going to do that same strategy, the double running back, until way later in the draft. Just hoping and focusing on those 2 as our main guys. And back to the wide receiver room, we still have not Amari Cooper. I'm never taking Amari Cooper. We still have Allen Robinson. We have Brandon Cooks, who I love and obviously take a lot. I'm going to take Allen Robinson here as our 2nd receiver. He's the 2nd receiver on the Rams, but could get wide receiver 1 to work in volume with Matthew Stafford. Obviously, Cooper Kupp's going to be a big target there. I was really hoping Brandon Cooks got back around to us. Fortunately, he did not. I just think Allen Robinson would have probably been taken with one of those picks as well. A lot of receivers go. Marquise Brown, Michael Thomas, Joe Burrow at the end of the 6th. Going to the 7th, we have Brandon Cooks, Chris Godwin, and Amari Cooper. And back to us, 2 receivers, 2 running backs, quarterback, and tight end. Like I said, I like to try new things in these mock drafts. I like to see if I go tight end quarterback within the first 5 rounds. What does my team look like later in the draft where I normally pick tight end and quarterback, and see kind of the flex options and flyer options you can have in some of these later rounds. So I think this is a fun strategy. Obviously, the stack as well. I was talking about loving Rashad Bateman and getting him as a good value receiver in the end of the 7th, maybe the 8th round, with potential Lamar Jackson stack. But since we already have Mark Andrews, that's something we don't have to worry about later in this draft. We could consider going for a running back here. It's almost always A.J. Dillon in this kind of area. I still like a few running backs, though. I like Damian Harris. I don't know why he's questionable. I hope he's not injured. It looks he left practice early with an unspecified issue. You don't like to see that. And this is why we do these mock drafts before the season starts, to see what everyone's lining up as and seeing who's going to play in the last preseason game and such. But yeah, there's still some great running backs. I love Chase Edmonds, obviously, every single time. So I think as I'm going to wait for my running back, I think I'm going to wait for Chase Edmonds in the 8th or 9th round. And I'm going to take a wide receiver here, and I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just an incredible value, 90 receptions last year for almost 1,000 yards. I think it'll get even better with year 2 and Jared Goff in the system. And he's like one of the only targets in Detroit. DeAndre Swift's still going to get a lot of work. TJ Hawkinson's still going to get a lot of work, but he is the receiver 1 there. And he looked really good last year, and obviously was a pretty safe volume play for most of the season at the end of the season. So that's something I like there. Then goes Jalen Hurts, Thielen, Mooney, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Juju, Hawkinson does go, A.J. Dillon, unfortunately, goes, Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, Miles Sanders, Russell Wilson, and Kareem Hunt. So a lot of the running back options went there. I would have loved Kareem Hunt. I would have loved A.J. Dillon. I am a Miles Sanders truther. As you can see there, lead back potentially. But we already know Kenneth Gainwell, they love Boston Scott in Philadelphia. Like, Miles Sanders is a fantastic back, averaging 5.3 in 2020 yards per carry and then 5.5 yards per carry in 21. He just doesn't get the workload that you would expect a guy like this can carry. Like, he is an incredible back, but they just love the rookie running back and Kenneth Gainwell, and Boston Scott just keeps getting some work here and there. And it looks like they've named him as the potential lead back, but we know how it's going to go potentially. Even though they have a fantastic offensive line, it's still questionable. He might just get like 10 to 15 touches a game total with 1 reception and maybe 13 carries. And he can make it work, but it's not the best value you can get going into the 8th round. It's not bad, though, I would say. And now we have a choice once to make again. We have the running backs, Damian Harris, who we just mentioned, potentially injured. Who knows? They're resting a lot of starters, but hopefully not dealing with an injury. Damian Harris would always be a good play here, but I'm going to go with Chase Edmonds in the next round. I think we'll be fine there. Still 6 or 7 running backs before him. Always going to go for Gabriel Davis here. As our 4th receiver, we're kind of locked down on receiver now. Gabriel Davis gives us a lot of upside if obviously Stephon Diggs ever goes down. Gabriel Davis is the number 2 target easily in the Buffalo offense, and Josh Allen absolutely loves to target him in the red zone. So Gabriel Davis is a huge pick. That's why he's flying up draft boards. He used to be a 10th, 11th round pick. Now he's going 8th, 7th, 6th. I've seen even 6th round on ESPN drafts. So he is flying up the boards as the expected, the number 2 receiver on the Buffalo offense, one of the best offenses in football. It's the same realization for Allen Robinson. He's on the Rams, the 2nd receiver on the team, but 2 great players, 2 wide receiver 2s that both are going for high value because you expect them to still have a good season, kind of like the Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen season you saw last season, where both of these guys had close to great seasons. Obviously less so for Thielen, but he still got averaging 10 touchdowns. That's kind of what you pick Thielen for there. But this is where we're going for running back. We would have got Lamar Jackson, of course. We don't need Tom Brady. And we're going to take our lovely Chase Edmonds here. A solid lock-in as our running back 3. Gives us even more PPR volume potentially. And now we got our running back situated. After Chase Edmonds goes Drake London, Cordell Patterson, Tom Brady, Pollard, Elijah Moore, Dak, Singletary, Ayuk, Traylon Burks, Zach Ertz, James Cook, and Tyler Lockett. I talked briefly about Singletary, James Cook, and kind of the trio-headed backfield in Buffalo and how it's going to make me take some time to see what the status is going to be there, because we know both Devin Singletary and James Cook looked really good in the preseason game that they did play against the Broncos. kind of backups defense, but still they looked fantastic. And Devin Singletary is still a pretty great runner. He's had a pretty good average over this the last couple of years he's played, and Buffalo still trusts in him. He's still listed as the #1 back, so it's still, and that's why they're going kind of close to each other, because you're not really sure. James Cook has a lot of upside, a lot of value, but they might still be splitting the backfield there in Buffalo, which for a 10th round running back, I would take a split backfield running back on one of the best offenses in football without a doubt. So yeah, not a bad choice there. Now back to us. We have 3 picks left. We already have quarterback and tight end locked. 4 receivers, 3 running backs. So could be one of these spots where we take another running back, but I don't really like the options here, and I'd much rather go with an option later like Dameon Pierce, maybe Ramondre Stevenson even, for a PPR kind of player. So I'm going to wait on that. Once again, looking at the wide receiver area, it's basically just Allen Lazard against the world. I'm going to take Allen Lazard here. Mentioned in the video for team number 3 pick last video with Trevor, you're getting wide receiver 1 in Green Bay, who's Aaron Rodgers is still throwing to. Like, Allen Lazard in the 10th round is just unreal value. Every time you should take Allen Lazard if he makes it to you in this kind of 10th round area, because you are getting a locked-in receiver 1, and that's one of those players that could be that #1 player that gets you to a championship. You know, that really late round value that for some reason he's not being drafted as high as a value as he should be. I mean, we already know Aaron Rodgers is going to hit Lazard a ton of times. He's not going to get Devontae Adams like numbers, obviously, but Aaron Rodgers really trusts in Allen Lazard. He thinks he is one of the best players on the team, and he can fit into the Devontae Adams role. So I think that's without a doubt a solid pick there. Then after that goes Ramondre Stevenson, which is unfortunate because that was our next choice. He went even past Melvin Gordon. Damn you, Team 3. But then Robert Woods, Freiermuth, Aaron Rodgers, Dawson Knox, Matthew Stafford. So the quarterback tight end run's starting to go a little bit here, but we're already locked in on that, obviously. And there's still great choices here at receiver, and this is why I stress receivers. You can get so much value in late receivers or in late drafts with receivers, because you still have someone like Chris Olave. If Michael Thomas is not 100%, Chris Olave is the #1 receiver on the team. If Michael Thomas is 100%, Chris Olave is still going to get a lot of work, because we know Jameis Winston, as much as people hate Jameis Winston, he was fantastic for fantasy football. He won me a championship a few years ago back in Tampa Bay. So I think he's really good for the receivers at the very least. He's going to make use of Chris Olave and Michael Thomas for sure. So you're going to get good value here in the 11th if you take someone like Chris Olave. I already talked about the upside of Kadarius Toney in a situation like this. He's potentially the #1 receiver in New York. You already know Kenny Galladay's had plenty of hamstring issues, and it might not be healthy for a majority of the season. So Kadarius Toney is going to be one of the top targets there in New York. So I would highly suggest looking at his way at the end of the draft. Something Trevor mentioned in the last video, Christian Kirk, a pretty good option for if you don't have many great starting receivers or safe receivers. Christian Kirk is probably easily there in this 11th, 12th round area as a starting wide receiver 1 for Jacksonville. They paid him a lot of money to play over in Jacksonville, so you just got to hope Trevor Lawrence can do it. And I've seen some videos, I've seen some statistics. Trevor Lawrence looked like he had a bad season, but it wasn't as bad as most people think, simply just because he was on a terrible team with terrible coaching. It hopefully can only improve from there. So yeah, Christian Kirk is a great option here. We already have 5 receivers, so I'm not looking to get any more. This will probably just be running back. I'll take Dameon Pierce here. Like I said, the upside for a starting running back in the 11th round. He's expected to play in the next preseason game, and it's going to be interesting to see how they want to use him. And there are some options behind him, Marlon Mack and Rex Burkhead, but he can inch himself as the starter here. And it's not a great offense, but if you can lock in a starting running back at the end of your draft in Dameon Pierce, you should do that every single time. Melvin Gordon, I'm not against either, but these are 3 players, Melvin Gordon, James Robinson, Michael Carter, 3 players that are in timeshares that you just don't know if they're going to get the workload that you expect. And especially with Michael Carter and James Robinson on bad offenses, it's not necessarily worth a pick to try and risk that share in the volume of bad offenses. Melvin Gordon is maybe a little bit on the other side, but I still think it's going to be maybe a 65-35. So Javonte Williams, obviously going in the 3rd round, you're going to want that instead. But I still think Melvin Gordon's a good cuff option, because if Javonte Williams ever has problems or Melvin Gordon looks great, having a split running back on a great offense now in Denver with Russell Wilson, I think Melvin Gordon's a good take there in the end of the 11th round. And I talked about Mike Gesicki last video as well. Supposedly, the Mike McDaniel's trying to make him a pass blocking or run blocking tight end, where obviously we all know he's a great receiving tight end and he's a pass catching tight end. And now they're trying to transition him over to the blocking instead. And now you can even see there's trade rumors for Mike Gesicki. So keep an eye out for that, as if you're trying to go late tight end in your drafts and you're eyeing Mike Gesicki, just know he could get traded. He could only be a pass blocking, run blocking tight end this season, and you're not going to want that as your fantasy football tight end. So definitely keep an eye out if you want a late tight end to watch out for Mike Gesicki. Obviously, Cole Kmet is rising a ton. People absolutely love his value coming into his second year out of Notre Dame. The offense is not great. We know that. There's just no other options on the Chicago offense. So Justin Fields has to hit for his tight end, Cole Kmet. I mean, it's wide receiver 2, Byron Pringle in Chicago. That should tell you enough about the Chicago offense. But we got our last pick of the draft here, and just kind of going for a late round flyer for some value potentially at the running back wide receiver area. We have 5 receivers, so maybe we take another running back here. And I'm totally okay with taking someone like Nyheim Hines. He has incredible value. If you obviously don't draft Jonathan Taylor early, you get Nyheim Hines late in the draft. He's still going to get a lot of workload. They paid him to come back, and they want to use him as such. So as a backup option, a secondary option, if anything happens to Jonathan Taylor, which obviously all of us hope does not happen for any fantasy football player, but if something happens and he does go down with a slight injury, Nyheim Hines is going to get all of the workload. And we already know he's an incredible pass-catching running back. So having that at the end of the 12th round, I think, is a lock in, and he's almost never going to have to play for us. We can drop him if need be for a potential waiver wire pickup if somebody does go down or someone shines in week 1. So that's our draft for pick number 4. Let me know what you thought about it. At quarterback, Lamar Jackson. Running backs, we have Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara as our starters. Chase Edmonds, Dameon Pierce, Nyheim Hines on the bench. At wide receiver, we have Michael Pittman Jr., our wide receiver 1. And wide receiver 2, Allen Robinson / Amon-Ra St. Brown and Gabriel Davis, and even Alan Lazard there on the bench. And so this is what I was saying. There's just so much receiver value in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round of these drafts that you really can't go wrong with not taking a receiver early and still being able to get a solid wide receiver 1 in the 4th or 5th round with Michael Pittman Jr., with potential DJ Moore, who's been fantastic. Or you go with one of the Broncos receivers. It's still a toss-up, but it's edging towards Courtland Sutton, so that would be my choice personally. And then, of course, we have the stack at tight end with Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson being just a really good stack to have. Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes stack did also pan out for Team 3. But yeah, let me know how you thought this draft went, if you'd make any improvements, any other decisions. Also, leave a like and a comment down below. We'll get Team 5s and the rest of these going before draft season is ahead of us. So we'll see you next time for pick number 5. Have a good rest of your day. See you then.